Oh, welcome back to the Catholic Guide to Sustainable Living. This is a really interesting conversation today because it slightly answers the question of how we should live. I think a lot of Catholics in the 21st century are pondering this in the midst of a society which is defined by consumption and independence, in which we live pretty solitary lives in our own little kingdoms with our own lawnmower and our own stuff and our own job and our own income and our own mortgage. How do we break out of that and try and develop communities where we're interdependent, where we support each other, communities of faith? Now, one very interesting solution to this has been proposed by Stephen Fleming, who's established what he calls homestead guilds. And the idea of guilds is to actually lead to flourishing cultures, flourishing Catholic cultures, or flourishing independent Catholic communities. And they work basically by sharing communal tasks on the homestead. But you don't have to have a homestead. You just need to be willing to collaborate, offer what you've got, share some tools in common. So the priority is to look after the material needs of your own family first, but then you're willing to collaborate with other members of the community and serve them, participate with them. So really interesting and very practical solution to some of these questions that often seem pretty hopeless. Cool. Thanks for coming on, Stephen. I wanted to ask you about, so when we're at the Liturgy of the Land conference and talking to, who was I talking to particularly? Joel Stroot, of course, who's a great talker, was telling me all about the guilds around the fire while drinking beer. And he said, get on to this guy called Stephen to talk about the Catholic guilds. So I got a bit of an idea, but maybe you could talk about what these guilds are
Absolutely.
for.
Yeah. So I'll go into, I guess, the inspiration for how we got to the point where
Yeah.
we are now, but I'm going to start at the present day. So in our parish, St. Dorothy's in Lincolnton, North Carolina, here, we have a Catholic Homesteading Guild, which is really comprised of a men's group and a women's group. And it's that way for particular reasons, which I can get into in terms of the structure later.
Mm.
But essentially, what we're trying to do and what we are doing and what we're blessed with, I should say, is an interdependent group of people who want to help each other come close to God through the land and co create a culture of truth, beauty, and goodness through kind of mutual self sacrifice and support, um, while respecting sort of the needs that each family has to take care of itself as well. So, in our parish, just as an example, we butcher together. Um, when there's a big project that needs doing, we work on it together. We teach each other a lot of skills. We kind of mind share. We have tool sharing that we do. We support each other in times of weakness, and it's just become this incredibly beautiful community of people who are living Christian love for each other, while trying to come close to Jesus through the land and orient their lives toward the Blessed Sacrament, as a center of our lives, right? To make our parish life kind of the center of our life and community. And the result is obviously kind of what you would want, which is an authentic, thriving community like you hear about in the Book of Acts, where people care
Mm.
for each other and support one another and love one another. Um, and kind of one of the beautiful things it does is it opens you up to go outside of sort of the walls we build around ourselves in modern America, especially to kind of have our own isolation that we create.
Yes, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. So how did it start? That's a difficult thing. I feel like that's a difficult thing to establish at the beginning before you get the momentum going.
I'll go back to the beginning of how it
Mm.
started ideologically and talk about it practically, because really is the manifestation of the beautiful Catholic social doctrine of the church.
Yeah.
Um, it began really, its true genesis for me was in university. I went to John Paul the Great Catholic University in San Diego,
Oh,
and I studied entrepreneurship, started by an amazing man named Dr. Derry Connolly. The focus of the university is to impact culture for Christ.
yeah, yeah. We have a
Through
friend who went there actually.
Oh, really? Who's that?
Yeah, he's called Asco from Ireland, from Dublin. He's I can't remember his first name, but he got a lot out of it, I think. Yeah.
He must have
Anyway,
been much younger than than me because
Yeah,
in the first,
he's probably 24 now,
there
something
you
like that.
go. Yeah, in the first three classes, I knew everybody because there were like
Right.
30 people in each
I
class,
was
right?
wondering that.
And
Yeah.
I was
Yes.
the third class to go through. And
Yeah.
it was incredible at the time because it was focused on entrepreneurship and film and video gaming. And, all the business class guys, we had a professor. It would be like 10 or 11 of us in essentially a Socratic seminar with this brilliant business practitioner for 3 to 6 to 9 hours a day, depending on our class load. And we also had, a ton of theology and philosophy. I had Dr. Michael Barber, who's at the Augustine Institute, I think now,
Mm.
a former scripture scholar who was a protege of Scott Hahn, and then also Father Andy Yonan, who translated the Mass into the Aramaic Mass into English for the Chaldean Catholic Rite and ran the seminary. And he is a brilliant Thomas philosopher who studied at UC Berkeley. Davis, I think he may have gone to Oxford now as well for his doctorate. But those guys, we had 480 hours from those guys. And
Wow.
so we were just deeply imbued in theology, philosophy, art, and sort of innovation thinking and entrepreneurship, seeking to impact the culture for Christ through these skills. What a dynamic proposal, right? And I can say all of the people who I know who are close friends of mine who graduated with me have all gone in to do that in various ways. And while I was there, I fell in love with Catholic social doctrine through those teaching, and first was really enamored with how do we apply these principles to business, and then ultimately how do we apply them to society. And through a company that was started out of the university and that I worked at, doing communications for diocese and the church, I met a group of people called Centesimus Honest Pro Pontifice, who are a lay movement in the church. I would say actually they're actually a juridical part of the church. They're a ministry that's actually part of the structure of the church. And it was founded by John Paul II to promulgate Catholic social doctrine.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
their website is capp-usa.org, capusa.org. And they built this incredible resource to pull together the Catholic social teaching of the church, clearly speak it in a voice that's neither right nor left, and then also uh, provide it magisterially. So it's not a sort of crazy interpretation of the social doctrine. It's an authentic interpretation of the popes in a very balanced way that helps to give people the principles and educate them on human dignity, solidarity, subsidiarity, and society. And Pope John Paul's teaching, St. Pope John Paul's teaching about culture, economics, and politics as the three realms of society, and how culture is the most influential. And
Yeah,
coming from
so I
John Paul
definitely want to
VIII,
talk about that. Yeah. Okay, so then so far you had this great education in the Western Catholic intellectual tradition. You had this impetus or inspiration with regard to Catholic social teaching, and then you found this organization which was specifying or characterizing this rather well.
right, and
Is that?
really forming the lay faithful and begin to
Yeah.
form me. Sorry if this is getting boring, but
No, it's not. No, I'm just trying to keep up with you.
so during that kind of time in my life, my wife and I were going to church in California. We had this huge parish, 7,000 families, two priests, and you would go into church and you would just, you'd want to feel the fire of the Holy Spirit in everyone's heart, and you'd go in and all the guys looked like zombies who were dragged there by their wife. You know what I mean? And it felt like there was this cultural gap that was just kind of providing a gray area in which people were just becoming very tepid. So I started working with our deacon in that parish to, influence that culture in some way, by building out sort of a program for deepening faith through a love of discipline, kind of an approach to like revitalizing chivalry through a love of discipline for men, sort of like what
Okay.
Exodus 90 does.
Right.
It was in sort of the earlier time of that. And after having done that in the parish, we moved out here, and I realized, we moved out to North Carolina for my work, and I kind of had been thinking about all these, reading Chesterton, reading Lewis,
Yeah, yeah.
thinking about distributism and about agrarian life because we had moved out here to come closer to God through the land, which was part of our own family mission, which we came to through kind of discernment. There's a beautiful book. I think it's Elizabeth Warren wrote it. Is that her name? Emily Warren? I can't remember. It's called Head and Heart, How to Lead the Family Authentically from a Husband and Wife's Perspective. The husband providing leadership of the family, and then a wife providing, the heart type of leadership in the
Sure.
family, and how
Yeah.
those support each other. And and kind of a right structure for family life. It was a really beautiful book. And in that book, you come to discernment of your family mission. And part of that we knew is that we wanted to come close to God through the land. So when we moved out here, we wanted to come close to God through the land. We came out and found Lincolnton, North Carolina. It's near enough to my parents and family, and at the same time, still agrarian. And we settled down. And, it was in the middle of COVID. Things were a little bit less certain in terms of how people were feeling about security of their
Yeah,
well-being.
sure.
And in the parish, I just recognized people wanted to work together authentically. And so a lot of those principles of Catholic social doctrine that Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and the whole patrimony of Western culture gave us were immediately very useful, right? How do you respect each other's human dignity and work together as families in solidarity, but also have the subsidiarity and respect the personhood of the family? How do you balance those aspects and then also practically do a startup, right? How do you start up a culture?
Yes,
Because
well, this is the question that I've been discussing, and we'll keep going in a moment. This is a question I've been discussing with quite a lot of the guests on this podcast. Is exactly this: is how do you actually do it? I'm dealing with students in Ave Maria University and talking to them. Okay, what do you want? Well, they're very attracted by what you're talking about. A lot of them, a surprising number, are attracted by this agrarian lifestyle. And they also have, I think, a good aspect of this Catholic social teaching formation. But then, yeah, how did you move on from there? Because we want to know what's the pathway to actually getting it going.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize right here that that manifestation is extremely important, meaning the incarnation of these ideas is what will
Yes,
actualize them, right? And
very
I'm going to go into
difficult.
that now. I'm going to go eminently practical. It seems really very philosophical to this moment, but ultimately, our philosophy and our and the teaching of the church are precise and beautiful and true, and it's extremely helpful to manifest those ideas, meaning to incarnate those ideas as they are into the world. And culture is kind of is the incarnation of our shared inward belief, the outward incarnation of our shared inward belief. Okay, this is my own definition. It's not something that I'm saying is definitive. It's just like my opinion, man. Right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I'm just going to give you my opinion and how I think about this. And as an entrepreneurial business trained guy who's focused on kind of startup mentality, revenue making, and business, I think about let's delineate the steps we need to take to a minimum viable product. And I had inspiration in my youth going to Europe, seeing the cathedrals, seeing the deep, deep integral nature of the manifestations that they have or incarnations they have of their shared belief. You go to the top of Cologne Cathedral, and there are stone florets that are like 5 feet tall, carved by hand that took 2 months for a dude to chisel out in sweat and blood. That is where no one will ever see it. It's where
Yeah.
no one will ever see it. You go to today and you unfortunately end up in Las Vegas for a business show, and you go into the Bellagio and you tap on the wall that looks marble and it's styrofoam.
And it's
And
going to fall
there's
down in
there's
6 months
it's
or
it's
6 years. Yeah.
shut off the water, everybody there dies. So,
Yeah.
so on the one hand, you have this unbelievable dedication to craft, to integrity, to honoring something beautiful and true, and on the other, you have a complete facade. And my entire generation grew up knowing we were living in a complete facade. So I think the hunger people have for agrarianism is a hunger for an integrity of life, an integral ecology in some way.
Yeah.
And
I
if
think we
you
feel
want to,
desperately detached, don't we, from reality and all of its different manifestations. Our life is so synthetic. We're reliant on these terribly, terribly fragile constructs. I can really understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Anyway,
so
keep going.
if you look to history and you say, okay, in the model of Western Europe, where we had the faith strongly imbued in the culture, there were elements of integrity that brought about a beautiful, beautiful um, reality that still fills us with awe and a desire to know the Lord. Okay, it's evangelistic in its very foundation through its integrity. So let's get into how do you do it.
Yeah.
Fundamentally,
Sorry, I have to comment on that because that's such a profound statement, which is, in a way, there's no a priori reason why, for example, beautiful architecture should elicit in you this response of wanting to love the Lord, unless it was connecting fundamentally to some aspect of our nature.
Absolutely.
So in the
Thank
same
you
way
for
that our
saying
synthetic
that.
culture fails.
And I'm trying to move beyond the theoretical for the sake of anybody listening to this who's annoyed at how heady it is right now.
Yeah.
But it's very important to have the truth and to have a foundation in reality, because what we're talking about when we talk about the truth is an actual foundation in reality, the order of nature as God truly created. And if you were given the first principles through divine revelation in the tradition of the church to actually perceive that reality through simple apprehension, to understand it and to react to it, you are participating in fundamentally God's plan for yourself, your life, because you've been put in this time in this place by the Lord. And so if you're able to perceive reality and bring it into your heart and kind of work with it instead of against it, that is a big part of homesteading, right? Like a lot of the permaculture movement and a lot of the kind of more um, regenerative farming practices. Brandon Sheard talks about this a lot, like docility to the land and to the
Yeah.
Lord's intention in his creation, right? That's where I'm going, is the intention in creation. If you've given those first principles to look at nature and discern the Lord's intention for it within the context of the faith, especially because God is love and has given us this creation to love and to cultivate and to cherish. And its purpose, its telos, is our sanctification, eternity. Everything has to be framed within that. Otherwise, you get a misprioritization of things, you lose prudence, everything. What will happen is you will grow a ton of corn, you'll have a beautiful farm, and your wife will never talk to you, and your children will be misbehaved because all you do is farm and you don't take care of your family or love them. Or or you'll find yourself spending all day with your kids on the couch playing Zelda or reading them a book, and you'll never do any farming, right? You have to have a priority of goods. And it sounds like, okay, we're annoying being philosophical again, but like this is eminently practical. Like you can't live without.
So there you go. Okay. So this feckless young theological, philosophical dude arrived in North Carolina with these notions of homesteading. What happened next?
That's awfully generous. I don't know if I'd call myself. I think that what we did is events are a outward manifestation, an outward incarnation of an inward shared belief. And I had realized, like, okay, to in order to manifest a culture of love, to incarnate a culture of love, what you need to do is spend time together loving each other. So, that's not a very complicated thing. That's what the liturgy is, right? The liturgy is outward sign instituted by Christ to give grace. That's what sacraments are. And so when you begin to perceive these first principles and you understand your life in terms of a sacramental reality, you take that liturgical life and you say, like, okay, you know, go pray the breviary together. Let's do that as men. Which is an extending of the liturgy of the Mass. We're going to do the breviary together. We're going to say an opening prayer. And then after the opening prayer, we're going to talk about what we're doing on our farms. And we're going to have a guy give an educational talk on an aspect that's interesting to farming. And then we're going to have a group chat about what's going on in the guild in general. And then we're going to close with a prayer. Very complex, right? It's not complex. But if you do that, people know what's going on in each other's lives, have the ability to pray for it together. When you have a hardcore manly prayer, the guys come together and they feel that solidarity and brotherhood, which men need. And by the way, in the women's group, instead of having a kind of manly prayer that brings us together kind of as a war band, they have where they share what they need and they pray over each other in the women's group. So the two different groups are built around male and feminine spirituality.
Yeah, that's okay. So it
Inspired.
sounds great. I mean, I've encountered since I came to America so many of these apostolates, which are incredibly formulaic, and the intent I think is rather similar to what you're aiming for, but they don't work because I think somehow maybe they don't really have a very tangible common end, or they get caught up in the process. How is what you're doing actually genuinely establishing community among men? Is it because you've got the agrarian bit, or what is it that makes it actually work?
I think fundamentally one of the things that makes things fall apart in America is that you don't need each other and you don't have to, because we have so many conveniences.
Yeah.
And we're so comfortable and we don't want to invite people into the mess of our lives, and so we don't. But when you're living an agrarian lifestyle, you can't butcher a cow alone very easily. and you might need a front loader and don't have one, and it's a lot easier with 10 guys and beers than it is alone, you know?
Yeah, beer lubricates everything. Yeah. Okay, so you've moved slightly ahead, but I definitely wanted to speak about this. So I talk about this often with my wife Anna. You've discussed already or described already what a settlement looks like in Europe, perhaps a lot of the time, with the church in the middle and perhaps the school and the shop and the pub. I mean, when I first went to Ireland and met my wife, and she lived in a village of 80 people and there were 6 pubs, and it was fantastic fun. But anyway, um, here now where we live, and I want to be charitable about it, there's and this is a particularly good example of a place. In so many suburban places in Florida, everyone has their own little house, their own little kingdom. They all have a swimming pool. They all have a lawnmower. So there'll be a street with 30 people, and every single one of those has bought a lawnmower, which has been manufactured out of metal and it runs on fuel. And they've all got a swimming pool, which is quite extraordinary when there's one public one, etc., right? And all of these houses is bounded culturally, spiritually, and practically by its fence. But I think you're explicitly trying to break that down.
Precisely. What you're talking about right now is the absolute poverty in which we live. You would say, what insane wealth.
Mm.
But I think if you look at this historically, we are the poorest people to ever have lived because everyone else in antiquity, pagan or Christian, had at least the basic reliance on each other of a community. Whereas
Yeah.
now we're so completely isolated, each family and each generation of that family has to go out and make it alone in uncertainty. And it's just complete poverty,
Yeah,
spiritually
it's very
speaking.
stressful. Yeah, I mean, I think we actually do really well here in Ave Maria because there is an explicit intent to develop a Catholic community. But I look outside where structurally or architecturally it's the same, and it's incredibly lonely, um, and utterly unsustainable. Yeah.
And
Okay.
and it's completely fabricated.
It's completely
And,
fabricated out
and
of nothing.
it's
Yeah.
fabricated and it's a structure of sin that maybe I'm going too far here, but it might be I don't know. I wouldn't go with this. There's a quote, I think John Paul II, there are structures of sin that must be torn down. I don't think this necessarily is one of them, but maybe it is. It creates isolation. But fundamentally, what's going on is economically, we're developing everybody who goes off and leaves their parents at the age of 18, 24, 27, whatever. They're going off to create a new wealth curve for their family, ex nihilo, out of nothing.
Yeah.
And they're going to do that using bank loans
Yeah.
for education and for their housing, which are the two primary slugs of cash you really need to establish yourself and have thriving. So it ultimately is serving a financial system that we have this spread out kind of approach to culture. It is ingrained in our finance, which is the manifestation of influence in our culture. And then it is also architecturally imposed. And honestly, architecture, I think, has way more importance than I think a lot of Catholics realize in terms of incarnating our shared belief. Like,
Oh, of course it does, because it's like building a little fish tank for your fish. You put in various objects, and the fish are then obliged to swim round them. If we build our cities in such a way, this suburban manner, then we're massively constrained in our pathways, aren't we? We're almost obliged to follow the directions which have been laid down from the bank to the supermarket to the gas station and perhaps to the church, etc., etc. I think you're exactly right. Yeah.
and I think that there are missionaries needed, meaning people who are on mission, people who are on fire and full of the Holy Spirit, to serve the future of the city and the town. And a lot of people don't get this in homesteading. The farm is dependent on the city, on the market, principally dependent. If you have a farm and you make a bunch of stuff, there's this idea that we should be self-sufficient. Okay. I think it's a historical anachronism and I think it's a heresy.
Yeah.
You want to talk about self-sufficient? Look at people in Alaska who are really going it alone. They're lonely, they're kind of depressed, and they don't really have a very happy life, and it's very hard. If
Yeah.
you want a more integral vision of human thriving, look at agrarian communities where you have a central market, the market plots. You need a market in order for there to be an interdependence between the town and the city, or the town and the country. And we need people who care as much about zoning laws and how their city looks and is architecturally built as we need people producing goods from the land. And I'm very interested in when you talk about homesteading and goods from the land, this is sort of going a little bit further than the guilds. So we'll drop back to the guilds reading. There are areas we're missing in our ideology right now in the homesteading movement. People talk about agrarian life and producing goods from the farm. They talk about doing trades in order to support their lifestyle on the farm because it's very hard to be a farmer unless you're doing it at scale. And then we talk about professions like sales, law, finance. What's missing is manufacturing goods that come from the land in a vertically integrated way. What we need is frameworks, incubators, and funding to help people who are agrarian, homesteaders, create beautiful, authentic, true, and good products that are not based on comfort in terms of technology, but on goodness in terms of technology. Going back to a prominent philosophy we have of technology, which is all focused on comfort now, and to make these goods and sell them in an authentic marketplace that Catholics create and offer to the world as an evangelistic incarnation.
Yeah. Okay, so then I want to step back a bit. You have this guild, which is essentially agrarian, but well, my question is, how do you integrate? We can't all, for better or worse, we can't all be homesteaders. I don't think. But I think your guilds integrate people who aren't actively involved in homesteading to a serious degree. And of course they must, in a way, because we still do need, well, most homesteaders will have a second income of one kind or another. We still need people working in the professions. And so how from a starting point then, where do you go from a group of men at church to something which looks more like the kind of village community of artisans that you're talking about? And how do you add the market in, do you think?
So we're talking about, I'm going to split the conversation a little bit because what you're talking about is how to build a local economy as a startup as well as a culture. And I think if you have culture, economics, and politics from John Paul II, culture I'm addressing separately than economy. Culture, what I'm doing in calling the guild now, maybe one day the economic part of that would be called the guild and the cultural part of it would be a different name because guild really is almost more historically attached to economy. But for the sake of conversation, now that I've confused everybody, let's say the culture is working with the guild, right? And then the economic aspect is it has to be treated a separate way because its prudence is rooted in economics. So to answer the question you asked, you basically asked, how do you build a local economy out of a Catholic agrarian culture? Let's back up and unwind that a little bit and take it in its components so we can understand it in its wholeness. Culturally speaking, I think you have to have a culture of truth, beauty, and goodness that's focused on the Lord Jesus and the Eucharist before you can get to any kind of true, good, or beautiful product that's evangelistic or outcome that's evangelistic, because it has to have Jesus at the center. So if you have to build a culture first, that culture of love has to require sort of interdependence between families, where each family has its own personhood in that community and has mutual love for the other families, reflective of the Trinity. So those families, like, they need to look at themselves. Like, as a dad doing homesteading, I need to care for my wife and my children and get them to heaven. And this farm is a means of turning money into virtue. Because as a sales guy, I do sales and I get money, and I turn that money into a life for my kids. And I want to make that a virtuous, beautiful, good, holy life, right? That they come up in the sacraments. So
You're saying that building the farm is essentially not about producing food. It's essentially about creating a context for building virtue in your family and having a holistic and attractive family life.
Yes. Yes, and the right, like, yes, and it is also a solution to the problems we have with a lack of integral ecology with our food.
Yeah.
We live in a structure of sin. People don't really know this, but like, our food is dramatically poisonous. Like, I have a child who suffers behavioral issues when she has preservatives. Like, really goes from like totally normal kid to like very angry person if she has certain foods. And if you have that situation, like, what kind of culpability do you have? Like, what kind of virtue can you build if what you're consuming is causing your physiological state to be disrupted to the extent that your behavior changes? So, yes, it is a means of turning money into virtue, right? But it also is a means of building an ecology for my children that is healthy. I would like we raise our beef. We so on my homestead I have 5 acres and most of it's pasture. And we raise 4 pigs. Right now, we've done 2 pigs a year historically, but we're at 4 now because I've got these boys. Them boys will eat their own pig, man. I ain't gonna lie to you. Get that pig. And then I've got 2 cows. We do 2 beef cows a year now, and then about 70 meat birds that we do, and then we have 20 or something egg birds, some geese, some dairy sheep, and I'm trying to do wheat as well,
Oh,
which is about a half acre of wheat, which is something I'm also super excited about on a practical level. Is the production of small grains is really important if you want to get to a local economy. We can get into that later, but
mhm.
the the farm, provides a lot of meat for my family and vegetables. We have gardening as well that we do. And it's beautiful, it's good, and it's delicious. And it's a little less expensive for sure than the store. So it
Yeah.
serves all those means, right? It serves all those purposes. But I got mono last year in the summer and I was sick with a fever for 8 weeks, down for like 12 weeks. We had just hand harvested wheat here and it was in the barn and not getting threshed at all, and it was just going to get eaten by bugs and insects, which ultimately it did. And but my brothers all came from the parish while I was down and unable to do anything, couldn't even leave the house, and they threshed my wheat for me.
Oh, wow.
You know,
Lovely.
and anytime
Yeah.
somebody has an animal, we all come together and we butcher together. We butcher this past year did like 4 cows, probably like 8 pigs together. I don't know, more than 100 chickens between a few families. And
Yeah.
anybody who wants to participate in that is given immediately the skills, love, understanding, education, tools that they need in terms of just like immediate access, and it really does function as a
Yeah.
community.
Well, you've answered a bit of a question for me. So you have this place you create to build virtue and produce good food, but it also provides now a real common action and purpose for your groups of men. So it slightly changes the end of these cows, where perhaps the primary purpose of producing them is not to acquire 100 pounds of ground beef, but it's to provide an activity. It does do that, which is good and worthy, but it also provides really a legitimate common masculine task, which serves to build the community of men. And it gets you beyond your formulaic first or preliminary construct to something which is actually incorporating the body as well as the spirit.
Yes. And we have for once a quarter, usually an event where we bring the men's and women's groups together. Whether it's butchery, we had a bluegrass event. We're planning a Pentecost feast where we're going to have a pig picking, a slow cooked pig, and probably, hopefully, Father brings out the monstrance and we can do adoration with the Lord Jesus. And then also, we're going to have bluegrass,
Yeah.
and we'll celebrate the Lord in the Spirit and kind of enjoy together the fruits of the land and all be together in community. And those moments are extremely beautiful. I mean, they make you weep because people are authentically working together, praying together, being together, enjoying the fruits of one another's hands in an authentic setting. And that's sort of a life changing moment, right? That gives you like a real, it really does have a deep impact on you. And then through the year, you obviously have the liturgy of the year and in the seasons on the land that you go through. Right now is spring, we're all planting, and people are kind of harvesting the first beautiful leafy veg and asparagus and things like that. And then things get pickled and people will share them. And later on in the year, when we get to the summer, people will be overwhelmed with crops. So Joel Stroot grows so much. He gets just blasted with a ton of kinds of fruits and vegetables. And he gets to a point where he's like, just come over, have a beer with me and eat strawberries. Like, I can't handle how much I have anymore. Because he just plants like a madman, he'll tell you. And that's another phase of the year. And then you get to the fall and everybody is butchering and curing um and aging the meat. And then in the winter, things finally slow down and you start to cut down the weeds you didn't get to all year. You know what I mean? Bonfires and stuff.
Yeah. No, it sounds
So
wonderful. Sorry, keep going.
I just want to say, like, that is the beauty of the agrarian life that not everybody is
Yeah.
called to. And we have, I want to just say again, like, people who are called to the life of the town, like, we really need them and we need them to think about those how you shape that space and do similar things to provide uh, a life like that. And going back to the interdependence between the town and the country, you asked me originally, like, okay, what do you say to people who don't have 5 acres, who only have an apartment, but they're interested in this lifestyle? In the guild, we invite them in. We're like, look, what do you like to do? How can you co-create rather than just consume? How can you
Right.
participate in the community? There are a lot of people who have maybe a little bit of land or none at all, who still come to the guild to learn to weld or to provide welding or to brew or to um, harvest when somebody has too much, or to help out and just participate and be around it, or maybe to learn about how to do things and just participate and be part of the community. And it's really just more about co-creating rather than consuming, which is one of these. It's like a homestead guild. I almost don't like how that brands it, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you got to draw the line somewhere and say, like, yeah, this is about the agrarian community because we're an agrarian community supporting one another. This is what we're doing. We're homesteading. At the same time, if you're gonna crochet at home blankets or do anything that's other than just consume, like, we welcome that in. We try to help build that skill and support one another in that. And for some people, maybe that I've known to come to the guild, maybe they never do anything agrarian, but they get to come and experience the land and get out of the city environment.
Yeah.
I hope one day that there's a townsman guild, almost something like that, something to build uh, a culture of truth, beauty, and goodness in the town. Um, and I really feel like that's needed. There are a lot of people working on the architectural ideas of that I think are extremely important.
Yeah.
You had asked about economy. We can come back to that, but I want to kind of follow your lead.
Yeah, no, so I just want to say the guild idea of as you've manifested it is incredibly attractive because it's actually relatively accessible by the sounds of it. It's incredibly difficult perhaps to go out and start to build a Catholic village from the ground up where everyone's living within walking distance, which is perhaps the ideal. But actually what you're doing can be done, and you needn't be right next to each other.
I don't think you should try to manufacture a village out of nothing until you already have a culture of truth, beauty, and goodness focused on the sacraments together that's authentically living.
Hmm.
Like, to impose these structures without growing them
Yeah.
is a big challenge. I think Jason Craig talks about this a lot, but that you don't build a culture, I think was his words. He said you grow it, right? And by the way, why grow a culture from the land versus somewhere else? Well, there's very concrete reasons. A couple of them are these. If you're growing culture from the agrarian land, and I think this was Jason Craig again, he talks about a low culture. You are going right to God's creation, participating in it, being docile to it, receiving it, taking it into your heart, co-creating alongside it. And the goods that you create and the things that you build that are imbued with that purpose and beauty are directly referential to God's creation. And that's a really beautiful thing.
Hmm.
My dad tells me this story of when we lived in Switzerland when we were in the military, when he was in the military, really little. And he went up to the top floor of this house in Switzerland, and there's a wooden beam that goes across the top of the house in the attic. And it was a carved beam, carved with beautiful designs hidden up there.
Yeah.
And what that tells you is that that folk art that you see on there, nobody made that folk art with that carved beauty after going out and looking at a design on a Gucci bag or on a t-shirt or getting on Google or using Grok to tell them what an image should look like. They didn't refer to anything other than the beauty of the flowers and the Edelweiss up there in those mountains. And then they carved what was coming out of their own heart, that beauty. And I think that in our current cultural malaise of facade,
Yeah.
having that opportunity to bring beauty right from God's creation is exciting because it's very authentic and natural, and it is what it is. It's not trying, it's humble. It's not trying to be more than it is.
Well, it's exactly humble, isn't it? And to to add to what you're saying, when something is constructed in an emergent way that, as you say, and it is concordant with the primary nature of God's creation, it's going to be robust. It's going to be solidly founded in reality, and it's not going to disintegrate because it's actually coextensive with creation exactly the opposite of the top-down synthetic construction, which is false. It's fake. It's like a lie. It's basically a lie.
Exactly. And if we're not there yet, then what are we trying to do grasping for the town? We have to grow this first.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
And to me, like, there are principles of nature and society that are inherent to humanity that you can use to grow along the right lines, like a trellis. I'm not at all against structures and frameworks. I'm super for it. But I feel like, not feel like, I think and believe very strongly that we have to grow at the right pace. I look at us in this generation as at the beginning of the early church. We think we're super late in time. What do we know? God could have 10,000 years, 30,000 years. We think we're really special. We had a plague. There's been a million plagues. You know what I mean? There was confusion in the church. They look at like 1600 the Borgia, right? Like,
Yeah.
we think we're special, but we really need to look at ourselves like we're the beginning of the church. What are we going to grow as the future of the church? And we need to have like a 10,000 year view. We need to grow for our children a beautiful culture and provide them a place in which to grow up that's worth protecting. A lot of people who homestead are worried about protecting their situation, their life from whatever
Yes.
can happen.
Uh-huh.
Cool. Why? What are you protecting? What's so great about what you feel that you have that it's worth protecting? How about we grow something first worth protecting? You know what's not worth protecting? Modern American life. It can burn down. I'm sorry. Like, this isn't the greatest patrimony that we could live. There's better ones. You know what I mean? If it burns down to cinders, it's not like we lost the gem of all civilization in the history of the world. You know what I mean? We didn't lose something that was the best. Like, so go grow the best, like, I don't know. And then find ways to mold your life away from structures that are not authentic or tied to the first principles of reality. Like these the construct of America where we're based on road networks, massive amount of roads, move a bunch of people way out, then build subdivisions and put a bunch of people on tiny plots in a subdivision, maximize comfort and entertainment, maximize
Profits.
per
Yeah.
square foot
Yeah.
and interest on loans. And I mean, like, look, I'm not against, free market economics or finance. And in fact, I think that they play strongly into distributism. I think a lot of people misunderstand the principles of distributism. It's just my opinion. But I think that, like, look at how we did this in antiquity. How did multiple generations build wealth? I'm about to diverge from this topic. Are you ready for a little bit of a wild
No, we'll
ride?
diverge, and then maybe you'll end up back with building economies, which was the other half of your conversation, which we've been
Yeah,
waiting to get back to.
let's go down a really wild rabbit hole. Okay, so you leave your house. We talked about this earlier, 18, 27 years old or whatever, and you go and build your own new life for your own family. And then one day, maybe your parents will die, and if they don't have enough debt, maybe they'll leave you something. That's kind of like mine, right? I mean, kind of. It's kind of a sour way of looking at reality, but maybe it's kind of the truth. So why do we do that? Because I don't think historically that anybody did that. Go read the Old Testament, read the book of Sirach, and there's this kind of subtext of like economic security in the family having owned property because the Israelites had owned property that belonged to the family generation over generation through the Jubilee. And think about how that looks in comparison with today. Like, what tithe do you have left as like a 23-year-old couple? Like, you're so burdened.
Yeah. Well, you've left, haven't you?
$60,000.
It used to be a tragedy to leave your place and leave your family and start again. Like, if there'd been a famine or war, that you'd have had to do it, but you wouldn't have done it willingly. Why would you leave your family, the people who look after your kids, the people you love, that you're, I don't know, genetically related to and have been working the same patch of land for 100? It's a stupid thing to do.
And we throw away the wealth that could
Yeah.
have. Like, instead of adding incrementally, we're like, okay, we're going to start you on a new growth curve of your own at negative 60,000. Plus, you're going to rent for 10 years. And economically, you're just like, push somebody way below the net zero line. Net zero
right.
line.
Oh, you
And
just
then
took
we're
your
like,
cannon fodder.
grow out of it so that we can have banks make money or something. I'm not real, you know what I mean? And, sorry, I keep knocking on the banks. Banks provide great service in some ways, but economically speaking, like, how do you, if you can work independently within your parish community on the land and have a beautiful place for your kids to grow up, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, good luck, start over. It doesn't seem like the right structure, right? So if you're re-envisioning your culture, and I want to draw a line here, I should have drawn it much earlier. I am not somebody who believes we should have a separate society.
Good. I wanted to talk about that. I'm relieved to hear it. Yeah, I think retreat is exactly not right.
Yeah, how can we evangelize people and bring them to Jesus if we're in a separate society? How could we do that? We couldn't. And then if you have a separate if you have the same society, what do we need then? What is the line we're drawing? I think that we do need a separate culture. Like the mainstream culture, it needs to be evangelized and drawn to something. And in order to do that, you need to have your own culture. You need to have a culture of truth, beauty, and goodness. And I'm about building that culture, growing that culture, I should say, to correct my own self. We need to grow that culture, but we need to grow it near society, with society, so people can see the love that we have for one another as Christians that Jesus calls for in the gospel and that the Acts of the Apostles shows us so clearly. And I just think, I don't know, do you agree with that? I'd like to.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking again about how could you do this if you don't have a homestead or if it's not agrarian? And I'm wondering, could you equally legitimately and fruitfully do it in a town where it was a guild of people who were engaged in craft? So you mentioned that you had people who are into crochet and quilt making. I wonder, how do you have a guild of people who are professionals in a city? Do they also have to be doing some or craftsmanship, or can you be a guild just of intellectuals?
I think that I'll give you my answer for what it's worth.
Well, that's why I asked you.
Uh, I thought I thought it was sort of like you musing.
I'm musing in your direction.
Awesome. I think that there are multiple answers to that question that are possible, but fundamentally, the first answer is just parish life should be the center of your culture, right? The sacraments should first imbue us, and that's what, like, the church already provided the structure. They put a parish in every town, but instead of the parish being the center of our culture, we often, like when I was in California, we did not first associate at our parish. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
We first associated at kids' sports, to be honest with you, or education. And then when that was done, you just got isolated because you were too old to have anywhere to go and spend time. And it's like, oh, you can go to the parish where they'll play bingo and be around only other people your age. And there was this isolation of generations as well that happens. So, like, some of that needs to be fixed in terms of how we interact in parishes. When you're in a small country parish, it's not a problem. But going back to your question, we can't take away the union of the body and the soul because humans are both body and soul fully unified, right? We are our body and soul. We're not just spiritual beings. And so when you talk about economics and you talk about our spiritual well-being, they are in some way connected because our economics influence the way that we live. It's not like economics dominates morality, but there is an element where you have to say, like, okay, if you want to create a local economy, you you need agrarian people creating the fundamental raw goods.
Yep.
And the next step above, so you have the cabbage, and then the next step above that, the sauerkraut, and then the step above that, the Reuben sandwich. And I think one problem a lot of homesteaders have is they want to sell the cabbage. Some of them want to sell the sauerkraut. Everybody should be trying to sell the Reuben sandwich.
Well, it's the only way you can make a living for your family. You can't live off cabbages.
Revenue is vanity, margin is sanity, right? Like, I'm a sales guy. So one of the things we need is you need to make really incredible product and you need to go beyond the raw goods because you can't exist and compete in a commodity market. You have to make an authentic, differentiated good that is very reflective only of your location. If you want to look at the model for this, prosciutto di Parma, right?
Good.
Guanciale di Amatriciana, right? Like,
Yeah.
any cheese in Europe, Wensleydale cheese, Brie cheese, Camembert, these are places because that's the one place you could do this. Champagne, it's the place that produced that product, and those people loved, cooperated with that land, and brought a beautiful culture out of that land, and then created a product from that land that generation after generation after generation people fell in love with making, made out of love, brought to other people around the world. And how much is a ham that's made in Iberico now from hazelnut eggs? $13,000 to $15,000 for the cheap one, and then you could pay $30,000 to $40,000 for the leg of the expensive pig, right? What if you were producing 300 to 500 of those legs every year on your farm? You'll make it as a homestead.
Yeah. And what's wonderful about that, of course, is that identity. Well, selling a product like that links you very strongly to a place and to a community, which you then will start to care for. And if care is the foundation of environmental stewardship, then that's great. That's what we try to
Yes.
build. Try to build an encounter with your place, with your user community, and then shape an identity of care.
And this all
A
grows out of
place.
our patrimony and our
Yeah.
faith and the philosophy of our faith, which is just
Yeah.
the understanding of reality through the lens of our theology.
Yeah. So then I have to give it, one of the people I spoke to on this podcast was Veronica, who's part of a ethical, sustainable Catholic clothing company called Litany and based in New York. And she's really a fantastic person. So she is imbued with a Catholic understanding of the human person and of beauty and truth. And she designs and makes really extraordinary clothing, which is cut and measured to individual women to help them express their own beauty. So she's producing a high value product, which is two or three, well, several steps up your hierarchy from growing, I don't know, flax, I suppose, or linen, all the way up to selling a product which has a sufficient margin to, it's a craftsmanship product to live off. So
But I love what you're saying. By the way, that right there, that problem she's solving is a real problem, like the commoditization of our beautiful women through the infrastructure of clothing. Like
exactly
it's
that.
not,
Yeah,
it's
right.
just to commoditize women when it's like, no, everybody is unique, right? And like to have people try to conform to these arbitrary
Yeah.
size situation. It's not right, and it's not
No, well,
historical.
fast fashion is basically growing a massive amount of cabbages. It's the same sort of thing, really, but probably
Yeah.
worse, actually.
And they'll do that. And honestly, you know what people need to do is they need to produce beautiful textiles for her to use that are authentic
Yeah.
and from linen, from the flax, like you said, and wool. And if you want to build any kind of scale from an agrarian economy, if you want to really get the basis of that agrarian economy, the basis of it is found in Gilgamesh. It's grain, right? It's the foundation of civilization in Mesopotamia was the cultivation of grains. Why is that? Because you put one in the ground and it dies and it produces 30, 60, 100 fold. It gives you a massive yield. When you plant wheat, you plant like this much wheat and you get a field. It has a massive exponential growth curve. Like you want to talk about margins, don't go making commodity wheat. First of all, it won't work well because if you're not using all the chemicals and such, you're not going to get a good yield. Secondly, there's so much. This is a real rabbit, man. Let me surface off of this because I could go to this could be an hour of just talking about wheat. But if you produce grain, you can raise chickens, you can fatten cows, or you can feed pigs, or corn is a small grain as well, right? And if you produce feed, then you really get to a position where you can build margins. Whereas if you're just buying feed, margins are going to corporate America or to your local farmer. You know, you can buy grains, but I think that there are massive problems with the way that they're traditionally done. I know there are. And I think that many more homesteaders need to grow grains and then feed them to animals, to their family, and then build a supply of a supply chain for products that get at least to the fabric, right? Like,
Yeah.
or at least to the beautiful bread, or at least to um, a finished product. And then imagine, okay, I just want to give you this. If you were able to have a critical mass of 3 to 5 farms making a really beautiful, incredible product, somebody's making beautiful furniture and ambos for prayer, and another guy is making, let's say, something like cured hams, and another is making toys for kids, and another is making fabric and custom cut hunting coats for upscale hunters in Georgia and selling them online. And then you have a market where you bring together people like this in your parish and sell them to the city in a sort of marketplace at the parish on the weekend. Like that's something you can't find anywhere else.
Well, that sounds like a guild, yeah. Okay, so then for the young Catholics, like our students here at the university, who are asking how to live, perhaps the answer isn't, well, the answer obviously isn't going to be peasants on a farmstead somewhere, is it? Because it's going to be incredibly difficult. Maybe that is for a small minority, but ultimately you want to be adding value, producing something unique and beautiful like these relatively high value products. So you've got to have some people, I suppose, involved in primary production, but maybe they need to be operating at a slightly larger scale. How do you manage that?
I think
I mean, is there no room in the homesteading movement for larger scale primary production of materials for our Catholic artisans to make their beautiful things?
there definitely is room for that.
Yeah.
This is the place of innovation, man. This is where the gap is in the market. This is the unsolved problem that you're talking about, that we need smart people to come together, think about, and create beautiful, good, just structures of economics where everybody benefits together. And I would say, you asked about peasants. It's like, okay, there are a lot of people out there talking about how loans in general are usurious, things like that. I'm not getting into that.
Yeah.
I think that the person who's putting up the risk needs some reward. Sorry, call me an heretic if I think justice exists about monetary gain. But I think that we need people who are ready to invest in good business plans with good margins. And those structures can be created where you enable the money to be placed into use and the people to do the work that's going to make monetary gain out of that farmstead, and then for the investor to be paid off back out of it, and then you have a sustainable future business in place. And you could say, like, that sounds a little bit like a peasant who actually can pay out of their lord. Well, it's like, okay, you call what you want. Maybe it's finance, right? I think that we need those structures, and there are people who I know who are working on those structures a lot right now.
Yeah. Well, this is incredibly important. I think when you make the connection between homesteading and changing the culture, you you establish something which I can imagine people might be willing to fund, because I can't see a lot of people giving their riches to establish a bunch. Well, maybe they would, to establish a bunch of young Catholic families kind of doing their thing, although that's really attractive. But if it becomes literally a mode of establishing a Catholic culture and evangelizing the broader culture, then you're engaging in something which is really attractive. I can see that if I had any money, I would want to give money to that. I would want to give microloans to young families who are going to be building this
You
cultural
need
revolution.
you need great business models too, though.
Yeah, but exactly. So it needs to be rigorous, doesn't it? It can't be feckless hippies wandering off into the background, like my parents, and which is kind of attractive in its way. But it needs to be phrased as something which is robust, reproducible, and is actually going to be profitable.
And it doesn't have to scale. You have to have the appropriate, I mean, you can have an appropriate local scale. Another beautiful thing is, like, look, we live in a time in which you can sell on the internet and access massive markets. If you design an incredible, beautiful product and you know your
Yeah.
market and you know your margins, you can support a business at the right volume. I did an exercise with the guys here because we have a lot of wood here. We're near Hickory, which is a traditional manufacturing location for furniture, where we looked at what are the markets like for furniture production. Family table, 8 foot long table, made out of walnut by hand. How many would we need to make and sell, and at what prices, and what kind of margins could we get? And there's going to be a build up time to establish your brand and get your market going. And you can kind of begin to model these things out. But fundamentally, you could make 6 tables at 10 grand per table. If you have the market, you're talking about $60,000 a turn out of 6 tables a month. You have a few apprentices, like master craftsmen, it's viable. And there's margin there. There's 50% margin there. You're talking about $30,000 per month to the business, right?
Yeah. So then your
And,
investor is not just changing the culture indirectly, they're actually making some money.
and they're making a beautiful product,
Yeah.
something that is evangelistic in its nature. Because and look, you've got to look at, like, where has this worked? That's what the Amish do. You know?
Right. That's exactly what was in my mind. Yeah. Everyone loves the Amish because they make beautiful things. Right. Maybe the
But
Catholic can make even more beautiful.
but again, our purpose is not to, like, preserve withdraw. It's to engage
No.
and evangelize. And I think there's all kinds of beautiful businesses that could be made. And I think that there needs to be a step change in people envisioning really incredible products
Yeah.
and beautiful things, and thinking, you know, why do we have to make everything to be thrown away? Why can't we make something to last 100 years? Like, why can't
Yes.
my scapular last 100 years? Why can't my scapular be made out of leather and hand embroidered with beautiful, authentic textiles and have gold wire laced into it for the crown of the Blessed Virgin on there? And why can't the immaculate metal that's on it be pressed out of cast iron and coated in beeswax and then shipped? You know, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd
why?
pay $100 for it.
Yeah,
Because it would
you would,
last the rest of
and
my
you
life.
would love
Yeah.
to, and you would love if
Yeah.
that product existed, but it doesn't. And it's like, man, we could do better. we're living in a we're imbued in the wrong kind of culture, and we have to grow a new one.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
have to
I
grow it.
think that, yeah, you're offering something which I think is very tangible for young people. Come up with your idea. What is it you would love to make? What is it that's going to be beautiful, that's grounded in reality, which is going to last? I know I'm thinking of, I'm wearing a belt now, which is my dad's belt. And my mum bought it for him in London 50 years ago, and he wore it till he died, and then I've got it. But yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty knackered, but I think 50 years is all right for a belt. And you pay money for that, wouldn't you?
Well, that's another part of it is that the products that we make can be counter consumerist in the sense that they're made to last. And I think that there's something really desirable about that, and it's very hard to find. Did you know linen? I just was at a cool place called Hart Square this past weekend. They have a spring festival. It's where this doctor of medicine made a bunch of money and went and found cabins all over the southeast and brought them all to this square and made a historical village to
Okay.
kind of preserve history. And there was somebody there working with flax, and they said, you know, this flax that I have right now in front of you is 100 years old, and it's still in the same shape it was on the day that it was brought to this state. And they said they found flax that was spun in the pyramids. After they
Wow.
found it in the pyramids, they took it out and they spun it and they made something out of it. And what I think, like, linen can really last. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the process of making flax on the YouTubes, but it's
No, I
crazy.
haven't.
It takes a lot of work, but it's worth it because that stuff lasts forever. And then you think, like, man, linen clothes in the southeast are the best. Like, I bought these linen shirts because it's extremely hot here in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Linen is the best thing to wear in the south in summer. And in some ways, you know, people start to hear this kind of thinking and they go, "Oh, you want to make ugly, weird goods for weird people who want to wear ugly stuff." It's like, no, we need to focus on making incredible, beautiful things that communicate our vision of reality. And we almost have an obligation to do that.
Well, we do.
In
Yeah,
some
yeah. It's a sin. It's a sin to produce a crap, ugly, ugly thing. Yeah. I mean, okay. Actually, I have to qualify that because I just built a tree house, and it has its own beauty, but I mean, it's not a bit of craftsmanship, that's for sure.
Pope St. John Paul will come in the night and burn it down and say, "This is a structure of sin that must be torn
Yeah,
down."
well, exactly. That's what I'm worried about. Okay, so the end of that was not to create something beautiful. Well, it is kind of beautiful, but it was more the construction itself. But um, exactly, I agree.
But yeah,
To make
you're right though. You can't, like, there are ideals and we're being idyllic and there is a reality and you got to live in that reality too. But if we never envision a better future, we're never going to get one.
hmm, yeah, but certainly, I mean, I'm not going to become a craftsman, but it's an incredibly attractive
Never say
possibility, and
never.
it seems very tractable. Yeah, and I'm a feckless intellectual. I mess around growing vegetables and thinking about this sort of thing.
Maybe you'll make incredible sauerkraut for people or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I did do that once. Yeah, yeah, I have one of those huge pots, and it was fantastic. Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but if people are interested in agrarian life, I think these are really good things to think through and think about.
Mm.
What is a minimum viable product I could make? What is a sustainable market? What's the lowest volume, highest margin product that I could create that's extremely beautiful that I would love to make day after day? Those are the kinds of questions I think we need to start with. And another place where there's a gap, which is not interesting to everybody, is how do we take care of our investors? Like, people are all about talking about how interest is such a bad thing and usurious. Okay,
Yeah.
what about the investors? They're taking the risk, they're supporting you. These are good, loving, holy people who want this to come to be. Let's take care of them and find ways for everybody to benefit. Like, you know, maybe structure it different. Don't have a usurious structure, but interest isn't necessarily inherently usurious. I mean, my personal opinion here. I mean, Jesus. Yeah, let's talk about that later. Nobody wants to hear.
Okay.
Nobody wants to hear that. I've got my proof. We can talk about it if somebody wants
There
to
you
hear
go.
it. But
Yeah,
let's not argue right now.
okay, Stephen, we've pretty much run out of time. I'm wondering, is there anything you'd like to add, having done the? I feel like I've learned a lot. I actually feel quite optimistic after what you've had to say about a way forward for Catholic culture. But anything else to say? What would you like to add at the end?
That's super beautiful and heartening. Um, I think that I would just want to reemphasize, like, the purpose of all of this ultimately is salvation and evangelization and love. Like, create a culture of love. Like, that's really the whole point. If you don't have love, it's just flashing gongs and sounding cymbals and not really getting anywhere. And you know, take the steps, do things, incarnate the inward shared beliefs, try, fail forward, build a community that's trying that together. And I think that there's beauty to come out of it. We're really fortunate where we are. The people are loving each other, helping one another. We're optimizing for neighborly love. Like when I see neighborly
Yeah.
love, I know the guild is working,
Mm.
and there's a long, 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 long road ahead of us. We have to believe we're the beginning of the church, not the end of it. Stop licking our wounds and start thinking about how to love more and how to grow a culture that will revitalize civilization, restore something that we would be proud to call Christendom, something that inspires us with a great future. Those are the things that I think about and care about. And I think that the more people we can find and encourage and find the right structures to make it work for everybody, the better off we'll be.
Thank you. Oh, lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, well, God bless your efforts, no? Fantastic. It's really cool.